Kia ora koutou katoa, it's Mrs. Goodson here, and this is the fifth video for Level 1 Science about genetic variation. So this video is all about genetic variation and inheritance. So we're going to describe and define what is genetic variation. We're going to describe inheritable and non-inheritable characteristics within a group of living organisms and give examples. So non-inheritable variations are due to the environment. We're going to explain the link between DNA and variation in phenotypes. And we're going to explain the significance of an allele as an alternative version of a gene. So what is genetic variation? Variation, like the word variety, means differences. Genetic relates to characteristics that are passed on via DNA from generation to generation. So genetic variation means differences between individuals in a population or a species that are carried and passed on by genes or sections of DNA. So passed on from parents to offspring. Variation. So within a species, there is usually a great deal of variation between individuals, as shown by these cats and her kittens. So are these variations inheritable or acquired from the environment? So inheritable means the characteristics that are determined by the genes or the DNA and the things that a living thing inherits. Whereas some characteristics are determined by the environment and by the activities, food, diseases that the individual comes in contact with. So, is a characteristic inherited or not? Inheritable means that information can be passed on to the offspring. In order to be passed on, it must affect the genetic information in the gametes. Remember, the gametes are the sex cells, the sperm and the egg, or in flowering plants, that would be the pollen and the ovule. So if the characteristic is due to a change in the DNA, it may be inheritable if the information is also carried in the gametes. So if it changes the DNA in the gametes, then that information will be passed on. Inherited variations result from the activity of genes. They are genetically controlled. Genetically controlled variations cannot be altered. Some examples of this are hair color, skin color, blood group, fingerprints, and sex, biological sex, that cannot be changed. Acquired characteristics result from an individual's activities or nutrition or from their environmental conditions during their lifetime. So some examples are language, athletic skills, obesity, mental skills, suntan, bodybuilding, and acquired characteristics cannot be inherited. They cannot be passed on to offspring. Most characteristics are both inherited and environmental, a combination of them. For example, if we look a bit closer at hair colour, of course, you can change your hair colour by dyeing it. What about height? Height is affected by things like what diseases you might have had, what nutrition you've had while you're growing, all those kind of things. So it's both inherited and environmental or acquired. Can you think of some other things that are both inherited and environmental? So we want to be able to explain the link between DNA and variation in phenotypes. So slight differences in the sequence of the bases making up a gene, which is a section of DNA, are called alleles, or alternative versions of a gene. They cause the variations in phenotypes. The phenotypes is what is observed, the physical characteristics. These differences lead to genetic variation between individuals. So if two individuals have different DNA, they will have different observable characteristics. What characteristics do you have that make you different to the person next to you? Now, this is an example exam question about the plant, the Venus flytrap. That this variation has a red leaf. And a teacher put two identical plants she brought them to class and she put them in different parts of the classroom. So they had different environments One near a window grew short leaves, and the one in the shade grew long leaves. The colour variation in the leaves is due, can be passed on. So that's our clue that means if it can be passed on, then it's in the genes. But the different leaf length cannot. So the different leaf length was due to the environment. So inheritable means it can be passed on. Non-inheritable means it's acquired from the environment. And what's caused the variations, what's caused the inheritable variations is the different genes leading to different coloured leaves. And the non-inheritable variation has been caused by the different environments. So then you'd link your answer and explain it as relating to the Venus flytrap, and then we'll link it to the significance of leading to genetic variation. So in this video, we've defined genetic variation and we've looked at the differences between inheritable and non-inheritable characteristics. And we've explained the link between DNA and variation in phenotypes, and the significance of an allele as an alternative version of a gene which leads to genetic variation.